Hey everyone, ready to dive deep into the world of The French Connection? Released on October 9, 1971, this film has sparked endless discussions, and today, we're uncovering every thrilling detail. If you enjoy this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us grow. And for more incredible movie explorations and hidden gems, subscribe to the channel. Now, let's unravel the magic behind this cinematic masterpiece. Released on October 9, 1971, The French Connection burst onto the silver screen with the force of a speeding car chasing through the gritty streets of New York. It wasn't just another cop film. It was a groundbreaking, high-octane thriller that reshaped how audiences perceived crime dramas, setting a new standard for realism, tension, and complex, morally ambiguous characters. For its time, the film was revolutionary. The visceral, hard-hitting action sequences, particularly the famous car chase, became the stuff of legend. But what truly elevates The French Connection beyond its action is its relentless pursuit of truth, capturing a raw, unfiltered world where justice is never clear-cut, and the line between good and evil is often blurred. This film isn't a story where the heroes wear shiny badges and ride off into the sunset. It's not interested in presenting a neat, simple narrative. It's a gritty, unvarnished look at the lives of two detectives, Popeye Doyle and Buddy Russo, as they wrestle with an insidious drug trade that crosses international borders, pitting them against a suave and elusive French crime lord, Alain Charnier. Directed by William Friedkin and based on the book by Robin Moore, The French Connection is about more than just catching the bad guys. It's about how far a person will go, how much they're willing to sacrifice to expose a criminal empire, and whether the system itself is even equipped to bring the villains to justice. It's a portrayal of obsessive determination and moral compromise, a narrative that echoes the complexities of real life, leaving you questioning what's right, what's wrong, and what the consequences are for walking that fine line. The film is extraordinary not only for its explosive action sequences, but also for the way it immerses you into its dark, almost oppressive world. Friedkin's choice to employ gritty, documentary-style cinematography was revolutionary. With handheld cameras capturing the action in real time, The French Connection places you directly in the shoes of Popeye Doyle, one of the most flawed and fascinating protagonists ever brought to life on screen. Played by Hackman, Popeye is anything but your traditional heroic cop. He's abrasive, single-minded, and often crosses ethical lines in his pursuit of justice. But somehow, you can't help but root for him. Hackman's performance earned him an Academy Award, and it's easy to see why. Every scene drips with his tension and intensity, making you feel every ounce of his character's determination to win at all costs. This was a time when Hollywood was transitioning from the glossier, idealized portrayals of law enforcement to more grounded, realistic ones. Before The French Connection, audiences had seen countless police officers that embodied a kind of flawless heroism, easily distinguishable from the criminals they chased. But with this film, Friedkin stripped that ideal away. Popeye Doyle is a mess. He's ruthless, he's flawed, and he's driven by an obsession that could cost him everything. Hackman plays him as someone deeply committed to the cause, but who isn't afraid to bend or break the rules to get results. His partner, Buddy Russo, played by Scheider, balances him out with a more level-headed, cautious approach, though his commitment to the cause is equally strong. Their relationship, full of camaraderie and tension, is one of the key driving forces of the film. The way they feed off each other, their differences adding layers to their dynamic, creates a sense of authenticity that makes the film feel real, as though you're witnessing actual police work, not just scripted scenes. The plot of The French Connection is deceptively simple at first glance. Popeye and Cloudy are assigned to bust a major drug smuggling operation between the US and France. But it's not just the chase that makes the film so captivating. It's the complex layers of intrigue, moral gray areas, and mounting tension as they get closer to their target. As they track down a major heroin shipment that's being smuggled into New York, they realize that they're not just fighting to take down a criminal. They're up against an entire system, one that stretches across international borders and includes a web of people who are far more powerful and dangerous than they could have imagined. At the heart of the film is Alain Charnier, played by Fernando Rey. Charnier is the kind of villain who never raises his voice, never loses his cool. He's suave, intelligent, and always 3 steps ahead of Popeye and Cloudy. In his own way, Charnier is just as obsessed as Popeye, but with a different kind of focus, maintaining the smuggling operation and keeping the authorities at bay. His calm, controlled demeanor contrasts sharply with Popeye's brash, almost reckless approach, and this contrast plays out perfectly throughout the film, as each man seeks to outsmart the other. But The French Connection is more than just a cat-and-mouse chase between 2 charismatic leads. It's about the environment these characters inhabit. The streets of New York become almost a character in their own right. Friedkin and cinematographer Owen Roizman didn't just shoot the city, they captured its raw, unforgiving nature. The dingy streets, the dark alleys, the crowded subway cars, and the bustling marketplaces all serve to create an environment of tension and danger. The city feels alive, yet it's oppressive, a labyrinth where danger lurks at every corner. This sense of claustrophobia is punctuated by the soundtrack, a minimalist jazz score composed by Don Ellis, which further amplifies the film's sense of unease and anticipation. Among the most iconic scenes in the film is the breathtaking car chase. It's an adrenaline-pumping sequence that still stands as one of the greatest action scenes ever filmed. The chase, in which Popeye follows a suspect through the streets of New York while racing down traffic-filled avenues, is intense, raw, and thrilling. The car swerves through the city, narrowly avoiding collisions, as Popeye pushes everything to the limit. The sequence is not just about speed and action. It's about the desperation and obsession of Popeye, who will stop at nothing to catch his prey. It's chaotic and thrilling, and it pulls you into the chaos of Popeye's world, making you feel the tension with every sharp turn and near miss. What makes this chase so unforgettable isn't just the action, but the way it mirrors the film's overall theme of obsession and the blurred line between right and wrong. What truly sets The French Connection apart, though, is how it handles the theme of justice. The film doesn't offer easy answers or wrap things up with a neat bow. The characters are flawed, their motivations murky, and the ending leaves a sense of moral ambiguity that resonates long after the credits roll. Popeye, despite his intense dedication, doesn't emerge as a clear-cut hero. The criminals aren't all punished, and the film doesn't provide closure in the conventional sense. This raw, unsanitized view of law enforcement and crime is one of the reasons the film became such a cultural phenomenon. It tapped into a growing disillusionment with authority and the justice system, reflecting the gritty, turbulent social climate of the early 1970s. The impact of The French Connection on both cinema and popular culture cannot be overstated. It set a new precedent for how crime films were made, influencing countless filmmakers in the years that followed. It wasn't just the car chase that became iconic. It was the film's commitment to realism, its unflinching look at the moral complexity of the characters, and its refusal to provide easy answers. This approach would go on to inspire a generation of filmmakers who sought to explore darker, more nuanced stories of crime and justice. But beyond that, The French Connection tapped into something deeper in the culture of the time. It reflected the cynicism, the questioning of authority, and the moral ambiguity that defined much of the early 1970s, making it not just a thriller, but a reflection of a cultural moment. Even today, The French Connection remains a touchstone for crime thrillers. It's not just a film to watch, it's a film to study. It's a blueprint for how to create tension, develop characters with depth, and challenge the viewer's perceptions of right and wrong. The movie still feels as fresh and visceral as it did when it first premiered over 50 years ago, cementing its place as a timeless classic in American cinema. Watching it is like taking a trip back to a raw, unpredictable New York, a city alive with both danger and possibility. In the end, The French Connection isn't just a film about chasing criminals. It's about the pursuit of something larger, something more elusive: truth, justice, and the cost of obsession. It challenges us to question the systems we put our faith in, while also showing us the consequences of our actions when we step outside the law. It's a film that doesn't just entertain. It makes you think, long after the final frame fades to black. If you haven't yet seen it, there's no better time to dive in and experience the chaos, the thrills, and the complexity of this cinematic masterpiece. The opening moments of The French Connection pull you straight into the gritty underworld of New York City, setting the stage for a thriller that refuses to let up. As the camera captures the crowded, polluted streets, the hum of a chaotic, bustling city, and the rain-soaked pavement, you know you're in for something raw, something real. This isn't the polished, romanticized version of New York you might expect in other films. It's a place full of danger, grunge, and tension, a fitting backdrop for the relentless and morally ambiguous journey that is about to unfold. The first character we meet is Popeye Doyle, played by Gene Hackman in one of his most iconic roles. Popeye is an intense, unpredictable detective with the NYPD, and his approach to policing is as rough around the edges as the city he patrols. The film doesn't waste any time establishing Popeye's character. He's brash, overzealous, and driven by a single-minded obsession to bring down criminals, no matter the cost. Right from the start, we see him in action, tailing a suspect, and immediately we sense his restless energy. Hackman's performance exudes the kind of energy that makes Popeye feel like a man on the edge, someone whose instincts are sharp but whose methods are often reckless. He's not interested in following the rules, he's interested in getting results. This makes him a compelling, albeit dangerous, figure. Popeye's partner, Cloudy Russo, Roy Scheider, serves as a necessary counterbalance to Popeye's relentless nature. Where Popeye is impatient and impulsive, Cloudy is calm, thoughtful, and more aware of the risks involved. Their dynamic is instantly engaging, Popeye pushing forward with a blunt force approach, Cloudy hesitating, asking the necessary questions. Though Popeye is the more dominant of the two, Cloudy's perspective gives the film a deeper sense of realism. The relationship between the two detectives brings an added layer of tension to the story. Their partnership feels real, a mix of camaraderie and quiet conflict, driven by their differing methods, but united in their mission. The story kicks into gear when Popeye and Cloudy are assigned a case involving heroin smuggling. The heroin is being transported from France into New York, hidden inside a wealthy Frenchman's expensive car. The operation is sophisticated and well-organized, which immediately presents Popeye with a challenge. He's not just dealing with a low-level drug dealer. He's up against a well-oiled criminal machine. This sets the tone for the rest of the film. A battle not only against the criminals, but also against a system that is much bigger and more dangerous than Popeye ever anticipated. The detectives are after something far greater than the average street-level bust. The first pivotal moment arrives when Popeye and Cloudy attend a meeting at the police station to brief them on the operation. They're introduced to the central figure of the drug operation, a Frenchman named Alain Charnier, Fernando Rey. Charnier is everything Popeye isn't: cool, composed, and seemingly untouchable. This is a man who operates with an almost chilling calm, a stark contrast to Popeye's impulsive and aggressive demeanor. From their very first interaction, it's clear that Charnier is not just any criminal. He's methodical, a step ahead of the detectives at every turn. His calm and calculated approach stands in direct opposition to Popeye's chaotic, almost desperate energy. The tension ramps up further when Popeye begins to follow Charnier's every move, suspecting he's involved in the heroin smuggling operation. The early sequences show Popeye tailing Charnier's car, engaging in a game of cat and mouse through the streets of New York. It's a thrilling sequence, full of suspense and danger, as Popeye relentlessly pursues his target. The film's cinematography, which leans heavily into handheld shots and tight framing, gives you a sense of claustrophobia, pulling you into the action and making you feel like you're right there alongside Popeye in the chase. There's no room for error, and every corner could hide a new threat. But it's not just the pursuit of Charnier that makes the film so gripping. It's the constant tension in Popeye's approach. He's a man driven by a singular obsession to catch the bad guys, but his method is far from subtle. Whether it's confronting a suspect with brute force or following leads without a second thought for protocol, Popeye's unrelenting nature creates constant friction, not just with his fellow officers, but also within himself. His drive to get results has cost him relationships, and it's clear from early on that he's willing to sacrifice everything, including his own well-being, to get the job done. This obsession makes him both compelling and dangerous, a character who you can't help but follow, even when you know his actions will have consequences. As the investigation progresses, Popeye and Cloudy uncover more of Charnier's operation. They begin to close in on the intricacies of the drug trade, piecing together the logistics of how heroin is being smuggled into the country. But it's in these moments of discovery that the film starts to shift its focus from simple police procedural to something far more complex. Popeye's drive to bring down Charnier and his crew grows deeper, and we start to see the impact this obsession has on him. He becomes more unhinged, more single-minded. The more he uncovers, the more he risks, taking dangerous shortcuts, ignoring potential red flags, and even putting the lives of others at risk to ensure he's on the right track. One of the film's early twists occurs when Popeye, acting on instinct, decides to confront a key suspect in the case. He tracks the man down to a restaurant, and with Cloudy's hesitant help, forces the suspect to reveal more about the operation. The scene is a masterclass in building tension. The tight spaces, the dim lighting, the sense of impending violence. It's a moment where Popeye's willingness to push the limits of the law and his own personal ethics takes center stage. You can see how far he's willing to go to catch the people behind the heroin smuggling, but you also begin to sense that his methods may be creating a slippery slope that will have consequences later in the story. Another key moment that sets the stage for the escalation of the plot occurs when Popeye and Cloudy stake out a key location, a nightclub that seems to be a central point in Charnier's network. Popeye's focus on this operation leads him to make a risky decision. Instead of waiting for backup, Popeye decides to make a move on his own, launching an unprovoked attack on a group of suspects. What begins as a simple operation spirals into chaos, with Popeye's impulsive actions causing more harm than good. It's in these moments where the French Connection becomes a study in obsession, ethics, and the fine line between the law and lawlessness. The stakes continue to rise as Popeye and Cloudy begin to piece together the full scale of Charnier's operation. But they aren't the only ones closing in on him. Charnier, aware that he's being hunted, starts making his own moves, constantly staying one step ahead of the detectives. This results in a game of constant cat and mouse, each side taking risks, pushing boundaries, and trying to outwit the other. The tension between Popeye and Charnier heightens as the investigation goes deeper, and as the detectives uncover more of the operation's complexity, they realize that their target isn't just a petty criminal. They're up against an international drug network with connections and resources far beyond what they initially thought. But it's not just the criminals who are a threat. The system itself begins to work against Popeye and Cloudy. As they dig deeper into the operation, they face bureaucratic hurdles, pressure from superiors, and increasing doubt about the ethics of their actions. The more they uncover, the more they realize that this case is bigger and more dangerous than they ever imagined, and the very rules they've sworn to uphold may no longer apply in the face of such a powerful enemy. These early moments set the stage for the moral questions that will drive the rest of the film. As the first half of the French Connection draws to a close, Popeye's obsession has reached its peak. He's put everything on the line. His job, his relationships, and even his own safety, all in the pursuit of bringing down Charnier. And in doing so, the film has done something extraordinary. It's not just a police procedural or a simple crime drama. It's a deep dive into the cost of obsession, the toll it takes on the people who pursue justice, and the murky moral waters that exist between good and evil. We know that the stakes will only rise from here, and the twists and turns ahead are sure to push both the characters and the audience into deeper and darker territory. As the French Connection moves into its second half, the stakes grow exponentially, and the tension begins to throttle forward with relentless momentum. Popeye Doyle's obsessive pursuit of Alain Charnier and his drug operation has pushed him into dangerous, unfamiliar territory, testing his character, his methods, and his understanding of right and wrong. By now, Popeye has crossed the line into a moral and psychological quagmire, where his determination to bring down Charnier is both his driving force and his undoing. As the investigation intensifies, we begin to feel the weight of Popeye's obsession, its toll on his personal life, and the powerful realization that the cost of justice might be higher than he ever anticipated. The film's second act opens with Popeye and Cloudy still hot on the trail of Charnier's heroin smuggling operation. Popeye's aggressive tactics have earned him the distrust of his fellow officers, and there's a palpable sense of isolation surrounding him. He's too focused on the case to care about the mounting tension within the precinct, And with each new lead, the world around him shrinks. His world becomes all-consuming, consumed by the singular goal of taking down Scheider, no matter the cost. The tension reaches a boiling point when Popeye and Cloudy make a significant breakthrough in their investigation. The detectives learn that Scheider's network is not just operating in New York, but has an extensive international presence, with connections that stretch across the globe. The scope of the operation becomes clear. Scheider is not just a local criminal. He's part of a well-organized, sophisticated global drug syndicate. The realization that their suspect is not just a petty criminal, but a mastermind with a far-reaching network sends Popeye and Cloudy into a frenzy, heightening the stakes of their investigation. At this point, the film masterfully builds on the cat-and-mouse chase between Popeye and Scheider. While Popeye remains relentlessly determined, Scheider begins to show his own resourcefulness. He's always a step ahead, effortlessly staying out of the detective's grasp. This dynamic is expertly portrayed in a tense sequence where Popeye and Cloudy attempt to trace a shipment of heroin being smuggled into New York. The investigation leads them to a massive freighter docked at the harbor, and Popeye becomes convinced that it holds the key to breaking the operation wide open. However, in a heart-pounding turn, Popeye's investigation goes awry. He's forced to make a split-second decision when he realizes he's been outsmarted yet again. The sense of frustration and helplessness starts to seep into Popeye's psyche, a feeling that becomes even more pronounced as the film marches towards its explosive climax. As Popeye's obsession continues to deepen, so does the film's exploration of his moral decline. He begins to resort to extreme and questionable tactics. One particularly unsettling sequence sees Popeye going rogue by tracking down a key suspect. In a desperate and impulsive move, Popeye accosts the suspect on the streets, using his power as a cop to intimidate and coerce information out of him. The lines between right and wrong are becoming increasingly blurred as Popeye's tactics become more erratic and his need for results overrides his sense of justice. At the same time, Scheider is not just waiting around to be caught. He's always calculating, always thinking several steps ahead. His calm demeanor and relentless focus on protecting his operation make him a fascinating and dangerous adversary. In a key sequence, we watch Scheider, played with suave menace by Fernando Rey, as he carefully manipulates situations to stay out of Popeye's reach. He uses his intelligence and charm to disarm his adversaries, always maintaining an air of control. His calculated approach to crime stands in stark contrast to Popeye's brute force methods, making their clash inevitable. One of the most riveting parts of the second half comes when Popeye finds himself in the midst of a dangerous confrontation. It's the moment when the relentless pursuit of justice leads Popeye to a point of no return. He's trailing Scheider through a maze of underground tunnels, a final standoff that is both physically and emotionally draining. The chase is chaotic, visceral, and raw. Every corner turned heightens the sense of impending doom. The use of location is masterful here. The tunnels, dimly lit and claustrophobic, add to the sense of Popeye being trapped in a labyrinth of his own making, where his obsession has led him to a place where there may be no escape, no victory. The film builds to an unforgettable moment when Popeye, after a series of near misses and increasing pressure, finally gets a clear shot at Scheider. In a tense face-off, Popeye has Scheider in his sights. The weight of the moment is palpable. This isn't just a cop nailing a criminal. It's a moment that encapsulates the emotional and moral tension that has been building throughout the entire film. Popeye, the man consumed by obsession, finally stands at the precipice of achieving his goal. But just as Popeye moves in, the moment slips away. Scheider, ever the master of his fate, eludes capture once more. The frustration that consumes Popeye in this moment is crushing. Scheider has become more than just a criminal to him. He's a symbol of the unattainable, the thing Popeye cannot conquer despite every effort. This failure leaves Popeye questioning not just his approach but also his very reason for being a cop. His tunnel vision, his refusal to compromise, has led him to a dead end. It's a bitter realization that justice is far messier and more elusive than he ever expected. But even in the face of this defeat, the film's pacing never slows down. The tension between Popeye and the system reaches its breaking point. As Popeye pushes forward, it becomes clear that his methods have not only alienated those around him, but also endangered his career. The higher-ups in the department are losing patience with him, and his reckless actions start to catch up with him. Popeye's status as a rogue cop, someone who is willing to bend and break the rules to get results, begins to unravel. He's no longer the idealistic cop chasing down criminals for the greater good. He's a man who has lost sight of the line he once swore to uphold. The stakes of the case escalate in a critical scene where Popeye's pursuit of the heroin shipment reaches a fever pitch. The film builds a sense of urgency as Popeye and Cloudy are thrust into a series of increasingly dangerous situations. The tension peaks when Popeye decides to take the risk of following the heroin shipment, leading him on a high-speed pursuit through the streets of New York. It's another iconic car chase, but this time, the stakes are even higher. Popeye is no longer just trying to catch a criminal, he's chasing something personal. The speed and chaos of the chase mirror Popeye's inner turmoil. With every turn, every near miss, it feels as though Popeye is racing not just against time but against the collapse of everything he's worked for. The car chase is another explosive moment in the film's second half. It's not just about the adrenaline. It's about the desperate need to catch Charnier, the need to finish what Popeye started, even if it costs him everything. The streets of New York become a battleground, with Popeye's obsession spilling out into every corner of the city. There's no room for subtlety, no time for second-guessing, just raw, relentless determination. And as Popeye swerves through the traffic, the audience feels every inch of his desperation, his emotional and psychological breakdown unfolding in real time. But as thrilling and tense as the chase may be, the French Connection doesn't offer easy resolutions. The second half of the film continues to hold the audience in suspense, driving home the central themes of obsession, moral ambiguity, and the cost of justice. Popeye's relentless pursuit of Charnier does not end with victory, nor does it end with closure. The film leaves you with a feeling of lingering unease, as Popeye is forced to confront not just the criminals he's chasing, but the personal demons that have driven him to this point. It's a bitter, hard-hitting conclusion, one that underscores the tragedy of Popeye's single-mindedness, the hollow victory of bringing down a criminal empire at the expense of everything else. In the final moments of The French Connection, the film pulls back from the chase and confronts the consequences of Popeye's actions. It doesn't give him the cathartic moment he may have hoped for. Instead, it leaves him and the audience with a haunting sense of ambiguity. The film's last shots speak volumes about the cost of obsession, the moral complexities of justice, and the brutal reality that no one, not even Popeye, is immune to the fallout of their choices. In its final, uncompromising resolution, The French Connection reveals just how interconnected every action, every choice, every moment truly is. It's a film about the moral cost of obsession, about chasing a goal so fiercely that it consumes everything else in its path. And in the end, it's a reminder that the journey to justice is not just a matter of catching criminals. It's about the people who are changed along the way. In The French Connection, the characters aren't just players in a crime drama. They are the lifeblood of the film, each one embodying complex motivations, personal struggles, and moments of profound transformation. Their arcs are shaped by the gritty, unforgiving world they inhabit, and it's their contradictions, their flaws, and their unpredictable natures that make them unforgettable. The film's brutal realism is reflected in the characters, particularly the central figures, Popeye Doyle and Alain Charnier, whose opposing qualities create a tension that drives the narrative forward. But just as vital are the supporting characters who provide the context for their actions and the emotional stakes that make the story resonate long after the final frame. From the very first moment Gene Hackman's Popeye Doyle bursts onto the screen, you know you're dealing with a character who is nothing like your typical heroic cop. Popeye is a man possessed by a singular purpose: to catch criminals, particularly the ones involved in the heroin trade that threatens to poison his beloved city. But unlike other cinematic detectives, Popeye is not just flawed. He's deeply troubled, even dangerous in his own right. His motivations, which seem noble on the surface, are often clouded by a ferocious need to succeed at any cost. Popeye is a man who throws himself into his work with a kind of reckless obsession. And yet, at his core, He's haunted by something far more personal than the crimes he's chasing. Gene Hackman's portrayal of Popeye is a masterclass in building a character whose motivations are laid bare through his actions and interactions rather than mere dialogue. Hackman doesn't simply play Popeye as a tough, gritty cop. He infuses him with an almost animalistic drive that makes Popeye unpredictable and dangerous. Hackman's performance is raw, often brash, but never one-dimensional. We watch Popeye in moments of anger, frustration, and self-doubt, as well as moments of fleeting vulnerability. The way Hackman transforms Popeye into someone both relentless and tragic gives the film its emotional depth. Popeye is a man who believes in justice but does not understand the full consequences of his obsession. Hackman shows us a man who's so locked into his mission that he alienates everyone around him, including his partner Cloudy, and even himself. From the first moment Popeye chases down a suspect, we see how his methods are at odds with his colleagues. He isn't content with following procedure or waiting for the legal system to catch up. Popeye is all about taking matters into his own hands. His determination makes him a highly skilled and effective detective, but it also makes him reckless, as his own obsession blinds him to the ethical boundaries of law enforcement. Popeye's aggressive pursuit of the criminal underworld often puts him at odds with those around him. Most notably his partner, Cloudy Russo, played with a perfect sense of restraint by Roy Scheider. Where Popeye is loud, impulsive, and brash, Cloudy is calm, reflective, and careful. The two men balance each other, but Popeye's growing disregard for the rules and Cloudy's increasing discomfort with Popeye's methods becomes a recurring point of conflict between them. Cloudy isn't just a foil for Popeye. He's an essential part of the narrative because he represents the voice of reason and morality that Popeye is too caught up in his pursuit to acknowledge. Cloudy sees the cost of their work, the emotional toll it takes, not just on Popeye, but on the system they are supposed to serve. Where Popeye races ahead, burning bridges, Cloudy tries to slow him down, attempting to remind him that they're supposed to be following the law, not becoming part of the corruption they're trying to fight. Scheider's performance grounds the film with a quiet strength, providing a subtle contrast to Hackman's more abrasive approach. The tension between Cloudy's more cautious approach and Popeye's obsession with results becomes a key element in the story, pushing the moral and psychological boundaries of their partnership. While Popeye's obsession with justice makes him a compelling lead, the character of Alain Charnier, played by Fernando Rey, represents the other side of the equation. The calm, calculating criminal mastermind. Charnier is a far cry from the chaotic, volatile Popeye. He's composed, measured, and elegant. A man who doesn't just deal in crime but runs it like a business. He's suave, articulate, and, most importantly, he's always one step ahead of Popeye. Where Popeye is a man of action, Charnier is a man of strategy, and it's this intellectual game of cat and mouse that forms the core of their relationship. Rey's performance as Charnier is mesmerizing, offering a cold, distant presence that contrasts beautifully with Hackman's fiery Popeye. Charnier's motivations are not driven by a need for power or dominance in the traditional sense, but rather a cool, pragmatic approach to his criminal activities. He's not a man who craves confrontation, but one who takes his time, calculating every move with precision. This intellectual approach makes him all the more dangerous, as he is never in a rush and always controls the narrative. Rey imbues Charnier with an almost unsettling calmness, making him not only a worthy adversary, but someone whose motivations remain shrouded in mystery. His quiet yet imposing presence makes him a terrifying antagonist, and it's this calmness that forms the perfect counterpoint to Popeye's unrestrained passion and fervor. As the film progresses, Charnier's ability to stay composed and evade capture becomes a source of both frustration and intrigue for Popeye. The chase between them is not one of brute force, but of wits, and in this battle of intellects, the tension between the two men mounts. Popeye becomes increasingly frustrated with Charnier's ability to slip through his grasp, and that frustration becomes part of what drives him to take greater risks, leading to his eventual moral decline. Charnier's role in the story is not simply that of the antagonist. He represents the cold, impersonal world of crime that Popeye can't quite comprehend. Popeye's obsession is fueled by a desire for justice, but for Charnier, it's all just a business, a game he's mastered, and one that he's not about to lose. Beyond Popeye, Cloudy, and Charnier. There are several supporting characters that help illuminate the world of the French Connection and heighten the stakes of the investigation. One of the most memorable of these is the figure of Sal Boca, played by Tony Lo Bianco, who serves as a key figure in the drug operation. While Boca isn't as prominent as Popeye or Charnier, his role in the story is crucial, as he represents the street-level players who help fuel the larger criminal network. Boca's brief moments on screen are filled with tension, and his interactions with Popeye help show the lengths to which Popeye is willing to go to obtain information. Another key supporting character is the police commissioner, played by Bill Hackman, who serves as a voice of authority and reason, often trying to rein in Popeye's reckless behavior. The commissioner's role is primarily to remind the audience that, while Popeye operates outside the law, there are still consequences within the system. These interactions with the commissioner not only highlight Popeye's out-of-control methods, but also underscore the larger institutional issues at play, further complicating the moral landscape of the film. Even secondary characters like the police officers who serve as Popeye and Cloudy's colleagues contribute to the sense of realism that pervades the film. They are neither heroes nor villains, but simply men and women trying to survive within a system that is as flawed and dangerous as the criminals they're trying to bring to justice. This creates a sense of authenticity, as the French Connection doesn't glamorize law enforcement or criminal activity but shows them as two sides of the same coin, both driven by their own rules, but both deeply flawed. What makes the characters of the French Connection so compelling is how seamlessly they interact with each other. Each one plays a crucial role in advancing the plot, and yet none of them are simply props for the action. Every character, from Popeye's obsessive drive to Cloudy's moral conflicts, to Charnier's cold manipulation, is intricately woven into the fabric of the story. The film's brilliance lies in how it uses these characters to reflect the larger themes of obsession, corruption, and the ethical gray areas that define the world of law enforcement and organized crime. In the end, the film doesn't just leave us with Popeye and Charnier as characters locked in an eternal struggle. It leaves us with a deeper understanding of who they are, why they do what they do, and how the world around them shapes their motivations and actions. The film's characters don't exist in isolation. They're products of their environment, and it's that interplay that makes their journeys so compelling. The French Connection is a film about the choices we make, the roads we take, and the people we become in the pursuit of something larger than ourselves. And at the heart of this pursuit are characters who, for all their flaws, become unforgettable because of the very human struggles they represent. The French Connection is a film that has remained timeless not only because of its raw storytelling and powerful performances, but also due to the clever, often subtle details that are embedded within the film. These elements aren't just there for decoration or to serve as distractions, but rather, they are intricately woven into the narrative, heightening its impact and providing an added layer of depth for those who are paying close attention. While the movie's main thrust is its gritty depiction of law enforcement, organized crime, and moral ambiguity, it also has hidden gems that reward viewers who know where to look. From thematic foreshadowing to visual callbacks, The French Connection is filled with details that enrich the experience and allow for new discoveries every time it's watched. One of the most captivating elements of The French Connection is the way it foreshadows the inevitable clash between Popeye Doyle and Alain Charnier. These two characters are not simply adversaries in the traditional sense. They are embodiments of different ideologies, two men who operate in opposite ends of the law yet are equally consumed by their desire to control their respective worlds. This thematic dichotomy is established early in the film and reinforced through visual motifs and symbolic moments. The opening sequence, which sets the tone for the rest of the movie, is a prime example of this foreshadowing. As the camera follows the action through the gritty streets of New York, we see Popeye Doyle in pursuit of a suspect, navigating the chaotic, unforgiving urban landscape. The visual language here is significant. The tight, intense shots of Popeye's face, framed in shadow, tell us everything we need to know about his character. He's consumed by his work, by the chase. But as the camera pulls back to show the sprawling, overcast city, there's a sense of isolation. Popeye is a man working alone, even within the vastness of the city. This sense of loneliness, of being trapped in his own obsessive pursuit, runs throughout the film. It's an early foreshadowing of how his single-minded pursuit of justice will eventually isolate him from those around him, including his partner, Cloudy, and even himself. This same tension between the individual and the system is mirrored in the way Popeye is framed throughout the film. In many scenes, Popeye is placed against large, imposing backdrops. The looming gray buildings of New York, the claustrophobic alleyways, the cold, indifferent streets. This recurring visual motif reinforces the idea that Popeye is a man fighting not just criminals but also the overwhelming forces of the world around him. He is a lone wolf in an unforgiving environment. In contrast, Alain Charnier is often shown in more expansive, elegant settings, exuding a calm confidence that suggests he's not just operating within the system, he's in control of it. Charnier's world is one of calculated elegance, where every move is deliberate and precise. This visual dichotomy sets up the eventual confrontation between Popeye's brute force and Charnier's intellectual manipulation, underscoring the philosophical differences between them. There are also several smaller, less obvious callbacks and visual cues that tie into the larger themes of obsession, pursuit, and failure. For instance, the film repeatedly uses mirrors and reflections to symbolize the internal struggles of the characters, particularly Popeye. There are several key moments where Popeye's reflection in a mirror or window is shown, suggesting his growing sense of self-doubt. These moments serve as quiet reminders that Popeye is not just chasing criminals, but is also grappling with the consequences of his obsessive behavior. One of the most striking uses of reflection occurs during a pivotal scene when Popeye is watching a suspect through a two-way mirror. As Popeye watches, the reflection of his own face distorts, showing how his moral clarity is becoming increasingly blurred. This visual cue foreshadows the emotional and psychological unraveling that will come as Popeye's obsession drives him to the edge. Charnier, in contrast, is almost never shown in reflective surfaces, reinforcing his sense of control and self-possession. He is a man who moves through the world with quiet confidence, always in control of his actions and surroundings. His lack of reflection highlights his own psychological distance from the chaotic world around him and reinforces his role as the film's cool, calculating antagonist. This contrast in how the two characters are filmed subtly underscores their fundamental differences and adds layers to their conflict. Another element that warrants a closer look is the film's use of the city itself as both a character and a backdrop. New York City is not just the setting for the French Connection. It is the environment in which Popeye and Charnier's war plays out. The city is harsh, sprawling, and filled with hidden corners, much like the characters themselves. There's an interesting connection between the relentless pace of the city and Popeye's own frenetic energy. New York is constantly moving, pulsing with life, and Popeye is in a constant state of motion, chasing down criminals, chasing down leads, chasing down his own obsession. The city's chaotic, noisy energy mirrors Popeye's unrelenting drive and his increasingly erratic behavior. One of the film's most famous scenes, the high-speed car chase through the streets of New York, serves as a prime example of how the city becomes an active participant in the action. The pursuit is not just between Popeye and Charnier's criminal associates, but between the two men and the unforgiving streets that represent their desires. The raw energy of the chase, amplified by the tight, dizzying shots of cars weaving through the city's maze of streets, speaks to the emotional intensity of Popeye's pursuit. It is not just a physical chase. It is a chase for control, for dominance, and for something deeper that Popeye cannot fully comprehend. The chaotic, unforgiving nature of New York becomes an extension of Popeye's own emotional state, pushing him to the brink of his own moral collapse. In addition to these thematic and visual elements, The French Connection also has a number of hidden details that reward sharp-eyed viewers, particularly in how it incorporates small but significant nods to the larger context of the 1970s. The film is, after all, a product of its time, and many of the cultural references embedded within it offer subtle insights into the social and political climate of the era. One such detail is the frequent use of surveillance and wiretapping in the film. As Popeye and Cloudy work to uncover the heroin operation, they are often seen listening in on phone conversations or watching suspects from hidden locations. This is a direct reflection of the growing use of technology in law enforcement during the 1970s, as the FBI and other agencies became increasingly reliant on wiretaps, surveillance cameras, and other technological means to fight crime. The film's portrayal of this new wave of surveillance adds to the sense of paranoia that permeates the story. It is no longer just about following leads and apprehending criminals. It is about controlling information, monitoring every move, and using technology to outsmart the opposition. This theme of surveillance and control speaks directly to the growing mistrust of government and authority during the era, particularly in the wake of Watergate and other political scandals. The French Connection also makes subtle references to the rising tensions between law enforcement and the public. Popeye's frequent clashes with the community, whether it's intimidating informants or alienating his fellow officers, serve as commentary on the increasing disconnect between the police and the very people they are meant to serve. In one memorable scene, Popeye is seen on a crowded New York subway, where his interactions with bystanders feel tense and hostile. The film doesn't dwell on this moment, but it's an unsettling reminder that the very methods Popeye uses to enforce the law also push him further away from the community he's sworn to protect. The movie also makes subtle references to the growing sense of moral ambiguity in the 1970s. Popeye, as a character, is not your typical heroic cop. His willingness to break the rules, use violence, and abandon his moral compass in pursuit of justice mirrors the cynicism that permeated the culture at the time. In fact, Popeye's descent into obsession and moral decline can be seen as a reflection of the broader societal shift towards disillusionment with traditional institutions and authority. The rise of anti-establishment sentiments in the 1970s is mirrored in Popeye's increasingly erratic behavior and disregard for the law. It's not just about catching criminals. It's about surviving in a world where the lines between good and evil are no longer clear. The French Connection also contains a clever nod to its own status as a groundbreaking film. In a scene where Popeye and Cloudy are investigating a lead, there is a brief moment where the camera lingers on a newsstand featuring a stack of newspapers with headlines about the success of the film The French Connection itself. This meta-reference adds a layer of irony to the story, suggesting that even as Popeye and Cloudy chase down criminals, the world around them is also watching, taking note of their every move. It's a subtle wink to the audience, acknowledging that while these characters are caught in a real-world struggle, they are also part of something much larger. A cultural moment that would leave a lasting impact on the world of cinema. In the final moments of the film, there's a haunting sense of emptiness. Popeye's victory is hollow, and as he watches Charnier slip away, the camera focuses on his face, exhausted and disillusioned. There's a sense of inevitability about it, as if Popeye's obsession has always been leading him toward this moment of personal failure. The film's ending is ambiguous, leaving us with more questions than answers. But for those paying close attention, there is one final, subtle detail. The shot of Popeye's face is reflected in the glass of the police car, a final reminder that Popeye's pursuit of justice has forever altered him. The reflection once again underscores the theme of duality. Popeye's obsession with the external pursuit has led him to confront an internal emptiness that will linger long after the film ends. Ultimately, the French Connection rewards those who look beyond the surface, offering layers of meaning, subtle references, and clever foreshadowing that deepen the narrative. Every element, from visual motifs to thematic callbacks, serves to reinforce the film's central themes of obsession, moral ambiguity, and the price of justice. These hidden details not only elevate the story but also ensure that the film remains a timeless, ever-evolving cinematic experience. The French Connection is often hailed as one of the greatest American crime films ever made, and its cultural impact is still felt today. Its raw portrayal of New York City, its gritty depiction of law enforcement, and its iconic car chase have made it a seminal piece of cinema. But what many don't know is that the film's journey to the screen was as chaotic, unpredictable, and gritty as the world it depicts. Behind the scenes, the making of The French Connection was marked by challenges, controversies, and a collection of strange facts that add even more intrigue to its legacy. From production hurdles to unexpected on-set events, the story behind the creation of this iconic film is filled with drama that rivals the film itself. One of the most fascinating and strange aspects of The French Connection's production was the sheer difficulty the filmmakers had in capturing the authentic New York City atmosphere. The film was shot on location throughout the streets of the city, and director William Friedkin was determined to make sure the film felt as raw and real as possible. To achieve this, The crew frequently shot in the middle of busy city streets, often without permits or proper coordination. Friedkin's approach was as unconventional as his style. Instead of staging scenes in a controlled environment, he often chose to shoot guerrilla style, using real-life traffic, pedestrians, and chaos to create the gritty, real-world atmosphere that became one of the film's defining features. This unorthodox method came with its fair share of risks and challenges. The famous car chase, one of the most celebrated action sequences in film history, was not only dangerous but entirely unplanned. During the filming of this scene, Friedkin instructed the stunt driver, Bill Hackman, to drive the car through the streets of New York at full speed, weaving in and out of traffic, often coming within inches of hitting pedestrians and other vehicles. This chaotic, high-speed chase was filmed with real cars and real people on the streets, creating an atmosphere of unpredictability that only heightened the tension in the scene. The filmmakers didn't have the luxury of closed-off streets or controlled environments, meaning they had to work with whatever they could get, sometimes even throwing actors into the mix of real traffic. One particular story highlights just how far the filmmakers pushed the limits during the chase. On one occasion, Friedkin wanted a shot where Gene Hackman, playing Popeye Doyle, had to leap out of a moving car and onto another vehicle. With no real rehearsals and only a quick brief, Hackman was told to just go for it. The stunt wasn't planned in advance, and the camera captured the raw chaos of the moment. Hackman's improvisational energy, combined with the dangerous circumstances, made the sequence both thrilling and harrowing. In fact, Hackman later admitted that he didn't even know what would happen in the scene until it unfolded in real time. This shoot-from-the-hip mentality encapsulated the entire production of The French Connection, where everyone on set was constantly improvising to create a sense of urgency and authenticity. This style, however, wasn't limited to action scenes. Friedkin was also known for his willingness to push the boundaries in terms of actor performance. Gene Hackman, already known for his intensity and commitment to his craft, was frequently placed in situations where he had to react instinctively to the environment around him. Hackman's portrayal of Popeye Doyle was shaped by the spontaneity of the film's production. In one scene, Hackman was instructed to chase a suspect on foot across a subway platform, and the action was shot with minimal preparation, forcing Hackman to adapt to the rapidly changing conditions of the set. His character's hyper-aggressive nature and impulsive actions were amplified by this on-the-spot approach to filmmaking, making Popeye Doyle one of Hackman's most iconic performances. However, there were instances where this improvisational style led to tension on set. Hackman and Friedkin had a notoriously difficult working relationship, particularly in terms of communication. Hackman, known for his method acting style, often wanted more time to prepare for scenes and would sometimes clash with Friedkin's fast-paced, seat-of-the-pants approach. One of the more infamous incidents occurred during the filming of a tense scene between Hackman and Roy Scheider, who played Popeye's partner, Cloudy. The two actors were instructed to improvise much of their dialogue, but when the scene wasn't coming together as Friedkin had hoped, tensions boiled over. Hackman, who was known for his passion, became frustrated with Friedkin's demands for a more dynamic performance, while Friedkin pushed Hackman harder to capture the kind of explosive energy that would define Popeye's character. Despite these occasional clashes, Hackman's performance as Popeye Doyle remains one of the most memorable in cinematic history, thanks in large part to Friedkin's insistence on pushing him out of his comfort zone. Hackman later remarked that Friedkin was unlike any director he had ever worked with before, and that the experience of making The French Connection was both grueling and exhilarating. Hackman's commitment to his character, being immersed in Popeye's world of obsession and relentless pursuit, was driven by the fast-paced, on-the-fly nature of the film's production. The same unpredictability was present in the creation of the film's score, another crucial element of its success. Composer Don Ellis, known for his avant-garde jazz compositions, was brought on to provide the music for The French Connection. Ellis was tasked with creating a score that would match the film's intense, frenetic energy. What's surprising is that Ellis composed much of the music for the film on the fly, with a limited amount of time. The iconic main theme, which pulses with urgency and raw energy, was born out of this rushed, spur-of-the-moment composition process. In fact, much of the film's music was created without being fully synchronized with the action on screen, a technique that was unusual for films at the time. The result was a score that felt spontaneous and unrestrained, much like the film itself. However, some of Ellis's music was so unconventional that it caused confusion among the crew. In particular, the opening scene's chaotic, jazz-influenced score was unlike anything anyone had anticipated. Friedkin, however, embraced the unconventional nature of the music, trusting Ellis's instincts and pushing the boundaries of what was considered traditional film scoring. The decision to go with such a unique sound only added to the film's raw, edgy atmosphere. Today, the score is regarded as one of the most innovative and influential in film history. But it wasn't just the score that was unconventional. The French Connection's visual style was equally groundbreaking. The film's cinematography, handled by Owen Roizman, is often lauded for its gritty, documentary-like feel. Roizman's camera work was integral to the film's atmosphere, but what most viewers don't know is that his approach was heavily influenced by the limitations the crew faced. Because the film was shot on location in the bustling streets of New York, Roizman had to adapt to the unpredictable nature of the environment. He was often forced to work with minimal lighting and on-the-go setups, resulting in a raw, almost cinema verite quality that set The French Connection apart from other films of its time. One of the most famous examples of Roizman's improvisation came during the subway chase scene. The subway tunnels, already claustrophobic and intense, were lit with barely enough light to capture the action. Roizman used only the natural lighting available, making the most of the subway's dim glow to create an atmosphere of tension and danger. This decision, born out of necessity, ended up contributing to the film's iconic visual style, further immersing the audience in the chaotic world Popeye Doyle inhabits. While The French Connection became a critical and commercial success, the film's production was not without its controversies and unexpected moments. One of the most notable occurred after the film was released, when The French Connection's depiction of the police force drew backlash from law enforcement officials. The portrayal of Popeye Doyle's aggressive, rule-breaking methods stirred up debate about how police officers were represented in film. Critics claimed that the film painted law enforcement in a negative light, glorifying Popeye's reckless approach to justice. In reality, many officers felt that Popeye's actions were unrealistic and damaging to the public's perception of the police. Popeye was far from the clean-cut, law-abiding hero that many had come to expect in cop films. His actions, while effective in capturing criminals, were morally questionable, raising uncomfortable questions about the ethics of policing and justice. Despite this, The French Connection became a cultural phenomenon and cemented its place as one of the most influential films of its era. The controversies surrounding the film only added to its allure. The questions it raised about morality, justice, and the nature of law enforcement were part of what made it so captivating. In many ways, The French Connection wasn't just a story about a cop chasing criminals. It was about the systems that govern society and the individuals caught within them, often struggling with their own flaws and contradictions. Behind the scenes, The French Connection was a true product of its time, a film defined by the creative risks and challenges that its makers faced in bringing it to the screen. From the dangerous, unplanned car chases to the unconventional music and cinematography, every element of the film's production reflects the unpredictable, chaotic world it portrays. The film's success wasn't just due to the talent of its cast and crew but also the willingness to embrace unpredictability and danger, both on screen and behind the scenes. As a result, The French Connection stands as a testament to the power of unconventional filmmaking and the lengths filmmakers are willing to go to tell a story that resonates with raw, unfiltered energy. The French Connection stands out as one of the most influential films of the 1970s. Not only for its gritty portrayal of crime and law enforcement, but also for its ability to encapsulate a raw, emotional depth in its most pivotal scenes. The film's visual intensity, sharp performances, and compelling narrative all come together in key moments that resonate with the audience on a profound level. These scenes aren't just significant because of their action or plot-driven importance, but because of their ability to tap into deeper themes of obsession, moral ambiguity, and human nature. As much as The French Connection is remembered for its famous car chase or Popeye Doyle's relentless pursuit of justice, it is these more intimate, yet equally explosive, moments that define its emotional and thematic weight. The opening scene of The French Connection serves as a perfect starting point for an analysis of the film's most impactful moments. It's not a dramatic, high-octane sequence, yet it sets the tone for everything that follows. The scene shows Popeye Doyle, Gene Hackman, on a surveillance mission, quietly observing a potential suspect through binoculars as the camera cuts between his face and his target's every movement. There's an eerie tension in the air, something that feels off about the situation, but nothing overtly dangerous happens, at least not yet. The camera work here, the lingering shots of Popeye's face, and the close-ups of his clenched jaw reveal a man whose deep obsession with his work consumes him. It's in these subtle, nearly quiet moments that the film's psychological complexity emerges. What makes this scene so special is that it doesn't immediately demand attention. It lures the audience in with its mundane appearance, but it also reveals the underlying danger of Popeye's world. We see him watching through a reflective surface, the camera capturing both him and his reflection. It's almost as if Popeye is disconnected from the world he inhabits, trapped within his own reflection. His obsession is already palpable here, setting the stage for the film's exploration of how this fixation will eventually overwhelm him. There is an undeniable sense of discomfort in this scene, something familiar about how Popeye stalks the suspect but also eerily distant. As the film progresses, it becomes evident that Popeye's increasingly desperate pursuit of his goals, his unwillingness to recognize when to stop or when to let go, will ultimately be his downfall. This moment encapsulates that idea with subtlety and precision. The emotional depth in this scene lies in its portrayal of isolation. Popeye is alone in his surveillance. While the scene may seem like a typical cop investigation at first, there's an undercurrent of loneliness that mirrors his emotional state. Throughout The French Connection, Popeye's single-mindedness isolates him from those around him, especially his partner, Cloudy, Roy Scheider. Even in moments where they are working together, there's an emotional distance between the two characters that speaks volumes about Popeye's internal world. The opening sequence introduces us to a man whose dedication to his work alienates him from everything else. He may be in the midst of a bustling city, but emotionally and psychologically, he's very much alone, caught in a self-imposed trap of obsession and duty. Another key moment that highlights the film's emotional depth and thematic resonance is Popeye's confrontation with Charnier's associates in the warehouse. Here, Popeye's drive for justice takes a darker turn, revealing just how far he is willing to go to get results. This is a moment that goes beyond just the plot. It's a perfect representation of Popeye's descent into moral ambiguity. The rawness of this scene, the chaotic intensity of the gunfight, and Popeye's cold, almost detached demeanor while dealing with the aftermath all speak to the emotional undercurrent of the film. In this warehouse, Popeye's actions are driven not just by a desire to catch the criminals but by his need to assert his dominance, to prove that he can control a situation, even when things are spiraling out of control. What makes this scene particularly impactful is the contrast it creates with earlier moments in the film, particularly the moments of quiet observation. In the opening scene, Popeye's intensity is focused inward, on his obsession, and on the job. In the warehouse, however, his actions become outwardly explosive. It's not just about catching the bad guys. It's about breaking down any sense of personal restraint. This scene is a vivid representation of how Popeye's obsession shifts from an internal, psychological conflict to an external, physical one. It shows how his inability to pull back, his stubbornness and his desire to control, drives him to an extreme place. He's not just chasing criminals anymore, he's becoming one of them. It is a moment that mirrors the broader theme of the film, the blur between right and wrong, where the lines of morality become distorted when a person loses themselves in their pursuit of justice. The film's most famous sequence, the high-speed car chase through the streets of New York, is undeniably the moment most people associate with The French Connection. It is perhaps one of the greatest action sequences ever filmed, and for good reason. The intensity of the chase, the pulse-pounding nature of the action, and the sheer chaos of it all make for an unforgettable cinematic experience. But there's much more to this scene than its physicality. It encapsulates the themes of obsession, desperation, and the consequences of blind pursuit. As Popeye, in his car, pursues Charnier's associate across the streets, we see a clear physical manifestation of his obsessive drive. The streets of New York become a labyrinth, just as Popeye's mind has become a labyrinth of obsession. The relentless chase through busy intersections, dodging traffic, jumping over curbs, and narrowly missing pedestrians, mirrors Popeye's single-minded pursuit of Scheider. The scene's frantic pace matches the internal urgency Popeye feels to complete his mission. It is a moment where the film's intensity is matched by the audience's emotional tension. The speed and rawness of the sequence convey a sense of desperate urgency. Popeye cannot stop. He cannot allow anything to get in his way, even if it means recklessness and chaos. What makes this moment so emotionally resonant is how it reflects Popeye's emotional state. While the action itself is thrilling, there's an underlying tragedy to it. Popeye's pursuit is not just physical. It's emotional, too. He is chasing not only a criminal but a version of himself, a reflection of his own relentless, destructive obsession. It is a moment that highlights Popeye's emotional breakdown, as he cannot let go of the chase, even when it spirals out of control. The high-speed chase isn't just about the crime. It's a reflection of his internal chaos and the damage it causes to his psyche. One of the most poignant and quietly devastating scenes in The French Connection comes near the end of the film, during Popeye's confrontation with Scheider. After all the action, all the chasing, all the moral dilemmas, the film comes to a point of quiet reflection. Popeye finally catches up with Scheider, but in the ultimate act of fate and irony, the criminal slips away. In this moment, Popeye is not just thwarted in his pursuit of justice. He's confronted with the emptiness of his obsession. After all the pain, the violence, and the emotional cost of his relentless chase, Popeye is left standing in a moment of profound silence and failure. This moment is the culmination of everything the film has been building toward. All of Popeye's actions, his drive to capture the criminal, his willingness to break the law in order to make the arrest, culminate in an anticlimax. The physical chase has been completed, but the emotional chase continues. Popeye has put everything on the line, including his own soul, in pursuit of justice, and yet, in the end, he has nothing to show for it. The emotional and thematic depth here cannot be overstated. This moment reinforces one of the film's central ideas, that obsession, when unchecked, leads to a hollow victory, or worse, no victory at all. Popeye's greatest failure is not that he couldn't catch the criminal. It's that his obsession has cost him everything, and in the end, it has led him nowhere. It is one of the most heart-wrenching moments in the film and speaks directly to the broader human experience of chasing after something we believe will give us meaning, only to find that it has only left us with emptiness. The aftermath of this failure also provides a fitting close to the film. As Popeye returns to his mundane, solitary existence, his final steps through the streets of New York feel weighty, as if the city itself has swallowed him whole. The world around him hasn't changed, but he has. The camera lingers on his tired, weary face, showing the toll that his obsession has taken on him. He is no longer the hard-edged, single-minded cop from the beginning of the film. Instead, he's a man broken by the consequences of his own actions. The poignancy of this moment lies in its restraint. It's not overtly emotional or melodramatic. It's simply the quiet aftermath of a man who has given everything to a cause that has ultimately left him empty. The French Connection is a film that thrives on its key moments, moments that push the boundaries of action, psychology, and emotion. These scenes are more than just pivotal plot points. They encapsulate the broader themes of the film and allow the audience to connect with the characters on a deeper level. The film's greatest strength lies in its ability to take these moments, whether it's the high-octane chase or the quieter, more intimate confrontations, and tie them to the internal struggles of its characters, particularly Popeye Doyle. These moments, layered with emotion, foreshadowing, and thematic depth, are what make The French Connection an unforgettable cinematic experience. The French Connection stands as a testament to the raw power of filmmaking, not just in its gritty narrative and unforgettable performances, but also in its bold and groundbreaking creative choices. Behind the electrifying action, the searing performances, and the gritty New York setting lies a host of innovative technical and production achievements that helped elevate the film into a legendary status. The raw energy that permeates every frame of The French Connection wasn't born out of sheer chance, but through a series of daring creative decisions, technical challenges, and improvisational moments that would go on to shape the film's legacy. From the very beginning of production, the filmmakers sought to break away from the conventional filmmaking practices of the time. Director William Friedkin was not interested in crafting a polished, smooth-surfaced crime thriller. Instead, he aimed for something that felt immediate, real, and almost documentary-like in its depiction of the world. The aim wasn't just to tell a story but to immerse the audience in the grittiness of New York City in the 1970s, capturing the pulse of the city as if the camera was a fly on the wall, constantly in motion and constantly on edge. This decision informed everything from the film's handheld camera work to its location shooting, and it was one of the most daring and effective choices made during production. In many ways, the decision to film on location was a major creative and technical gamble. At the time, filming on the streets of New York was not as common as it would later become, and capturing the chaotic, vibrant, and often dangerous urban environment proved to be a significant logistical challenge. Friedkin was determined to make the film feel as raw and authentic as possible, rejecting the idea of using studio sets or carefully controlled environments. The streets of New York became the film's greatest asset and its greatest challenge. The crew had to navigate constant interruptions, unpredictable weather, and the typical hazards of filming in an unpredictable urban environment. One of the most significant production hurdles came in the form of the famous car chase, one of the most iconic sequences in cinema history. This moment, more than any other in the film, epitomizes Friedkin's rebellious approach to filmmaking. The chase was not only physically demanding but also logistically tricky, as the filmmakers decided to shoot in real traffic with real people on the streets. There was no green screen or special effects to pull off this breathtaking sequence. Everything you see on screen was real, and the stakes were high. Friedkin wanted the sequence to feel as chaotic as possible, and to achieve this, the crew had to film in the midst of the bustling streets of New York City. The cars involved in the chase were moving at breakneck speeds, weaving between traffic and jumping over curbs. The entire sequence was shot without permits, often without any warning to the public, making it one of the most dangerous and unpredictable scenes in film history. The stunt drivers had to react in real time to avoid collisions with pedestrians and other vehicles, and every shot was done with a sense of urgency. The scene itself, which seems chaotic and haphazard, is in fact a carefully crafted and perfectly executed display of visual storytelling. The tension that the audience feels as Popeye Doyle, Gene Hackman, and the criminal's car race through the streets is a direct result of the real danger that the cast and crew were constantly facing. This wasn't a controlled Hollywood stunt. It was a high-risk venture that captured the manic energy of the city and Popeye's relentless pursuit of justice. This high-wire approach to filmmaking extended beyond the car chase. The film was shot in a similar fashion. Quick, with minimal setups, and often under difficult conditions. Cinematographer Owen Roizman, who worked alongside Friedkin, was pivotal in helping create the documentary-like look that became so iconic. Roizman's choice to use handheld cameras allowed for a sense of intimacy and urgency. The handheld shots make the audience feel like they are right there on the streets with Popeye and his partner, Cloudy, Roy Scheider. Constantly in motion, always observing, always ready to spring into action. This technique was groundbreaking for its time. While handheld cameras had been used in documentary filmmaking, using them in a Hollywood crime thriller was rare. Roizman's decision to use this technique in The French Connection brought a sense of immediacy and rawness to the film. The camera doesn't just follow the action. It becomes part of the action, reflecting the sense of chaos and unpredictability that is a constant presence in Popeye's world. Another groundbreaking technical achievement in the film was the use of location sound. In most films, dialogue is typically re-recorded after filming, a process called ADR, automated dialogue replacement. However, The French Connection made extensive use of live, on-location sound, even in noisy, chaotic environments. This added a layer of authenticity to the film, capturing the ambient sounds of the city as it was. The honking horns, the chatter of pedestrians, the distant sirens. The decision to use location sound contributed to the immersive atmosphere of the film, placing the audience directly into the heart of New York City, where the noise, the people, and the cars all blend together in a dizzying, sometimes overwhelming cacophony. The authenticity of the sound, coupled with the on-location filming, gave the French Connection an energy and texture that was, at the time, a departure from the polished, controlled productions that were the norm in Hollywood. Friedkin and Roisman also took a very unconventional approach to the film's lighting, further enhancing the gritty feel. They often used natural light in ways that many filmmakers at the time would have avoided. Streetlights, passing car headlights, and the ambient glow of New York skyline were used to illuminate many of the night scenes. The use of natural light gave the film a more organic, less staged feeling, enhancing the sense that the viewer was seeing real people in real situations. The film's dark, moody lighting wasn't just a stylistic choice. It was a reflection of the grimy world Popeye Doyle inhabits. The chiaroscuro lighting, strong contrasts between light and shadow, became a visual metaphor for the moral ambiguities that permeate the narrative. In a city as dangerous and corrupt as New York, where the line between good and evil often feels blurred, this lighting technique underscored the film's thematic exploration of duality and moral compromise. In terms of sound design, The French Connection is just as revolutionary as it is visually. The decision to use a jazz-heavy, experimental score by Don Ellis was one of the film's more daring creative choices. Ellis's score, filled with dissonant rhythms and haunting brass instruments, became as integral to the film's success as any of its visuals. It was unlike anything audiences had heard before in a crime film, and its strange, jarring qualities perfectly matched the film's fractured narrative and off-kilter action. The music in The French Connection often feels dissonant and unrestrained, just like Popeye Doyle himself. His relentless pursuit of justice is mirrored by the dissonant, feverish jazz that underscores his every move. Ellis's work on the film was revolutionary because it was built around improvisation and experimentation. Unlike traditional film scores, which tend to follow the emotions and rhythms of the scenes they accompany, Ellis created a score that interacted with the action in a more free-form way. He used unconventional instrumentation, including a large brass section, and experimented with odd time signatures, making the music feel unpredictable, just as the characters and the city around them feel unpredictable. The result is a soundscape that not only complements the visuals, but enhances the chaotic, unpredictable energy that the film exudes. As The French Connection was released, it quickly became clear that these creative and technical choices had paid off. The film was revolutionary, breaking away from the more traditional filmmaking norms of the time. The filmmakers didn't just want to tell a story. They wanted to immerse the audience in the world of the film, to make them feel the tension, the danger, and the urgency that the characters themselves felt. Every decision, from the handheld camera work to the location sound and unconventional music, was made with the goal of bringing the audience closer to the action, to feel the raw energy of the world the characters inhabit. One fascinating anecdote from the production reveals just how far the filmmakers were willing to go to achieve authenticity. During a scene involving a subway chase, Gene Hackman's character, Popeye Doyle, had to chase a suspect through a crowded train station. Friedkin, wanting the scene to feel completely organic, instructed Hackman to simply run through the crowd without warning. The crew had not coordinated with the public, and so Hackman was forced to push his way through an unsuspecting crowd of New Yorkers. The sense of chaos that results from this unscripted interaction is palpable, adding an element of real-world unpredictability to the film that most directors at the time would have avoided. But for Friedkin and his team, the risk was worth it. The authenticity of the moment became one of the defining features of The French Connection. Looking back on The French Connection today, it is clear that the film's visual and technical innovations were integral to its success. The raw, gritty filmmaking techniques and the decision to embrace risk and improvisation helped create an immersive world that was unlike anything audiences had experienced before. The film's impact on cinema is undeniable. Its influence can be seen in countless films that followed, particularly in the way directors approach urban crime dramas. From its groundbreaking cinematography to its unorthodox sound design and music, The French Connection set a new standard for filmmaking that many still aspire to today. It's not just a film. It's a masterclass in creative risk-taking, blending technical innovations with an unflinching commitment to realism and emotional depth. ChatGPT said, In the gritty and visceral world of the French Connection, the film's seemingly straightforward narrative of a cop chasing criminals is much more than just a police procedural. Beneath its surface lies a rich and complex exploration of the human condition, moral ambiguity, and societal decay. As the film unfolds, it becomes clear that it is not just about the pursuit of justice, but about the internal struggles of its characters, the emotional and psychological costs of obsession, and the ways in which crime, authority, and the power structures within society interact with each other. The central theme of the French Connection is arguably the idea of obsession. Popeye Doyle, Gene Hackman, the hard-nosed detective at the heart of the film, is a man consumed by his quest to apprehend those he believes are responsible for trafficking heroin into the United States. His drive to catch criminals borders on the pathological, consuming his every action and overshadowing every aspect of his life. He's relentless, to the point of recklessness, and his refusal to stop, even when faced with the inevitable consequences of his actions, becomes the film's greatest moral quandary. Throughout the film, we see Popeye's single-mindedness at work, his intense pursuit of Charnier, Fernando Rey, and his associates marking each step in the narrative with increasing desperation. The obsessive nature of Popeye's pursuit becomes evident early on in the film, in scenes where his interactions with his partner, Cloudy, Roy Scheider, reveal how much he has sacrificed for his work. While Cloudy remains pragmatic and occasionally offers a more balanced perspective on their mission, Popeye's drive to get the job done is all-consuming. He becomes obsessed not just with catching criminals, but with the idea of justice itself, an abstract concept that he clings to even when the means to achieve it become increasingly questionable. This obsession with justice is not only an internal struggle for Popeye but also a broader reflection of the theme of moral ambiguity that permeates the film. The French Connection asks hard questions about what it means to be right or wrong in the world of law enforcement. Popeye, who seems to act on instinct rather than principle, increasingly operates in ways that blur the lines between good and evil. His willingness to break the rules, such as using excessive force or disregarding proper legal procedures, points to a troubling notion that, sometimes, achieving the desired end justifies the morally questionable means. One key scene that underscores this theme occurs when Popeye aggressively confronts one of Charnier's men, causing him to bleed profusely as Popeye pushes him to reveal information. This moment isn't just a depiction of Popeye's gruff, hard-hitting nature as a cop. It serves as a stark representation of the lengths to which he is willing to go in his pursuit of justice, regardless of how far he has to stray from the very principles he claims to uphold. This symbolic bending of moral lines raises the central question of the film. Is the end goal worth sacrificing one's integrity and humanity? The film doesn't provide easy answers, but it challenges us to look at Popeye not as a hero, but as a deeply flawed, complicated figure, a man whose pursuit of righteousness leads him to the very edge of corruption. Popeye's obsession with justice isn't just personal. It also becomes a symbol of the greater systemic problems within society. In the context of 1970s America, the French Connection reflects the social and political turbulence of the era. The film was released during a period when the country was grappling with the aftermath of Vietnam, Watergate, and a rapidly changing cultural landscape. The urban decay that is vividly portrayed throughout the film, the rundown buildings, the seedy streets, the neglected neighborhoods, mirrors the moral decay within Popeye himself. The city of New York, in many ways, acts as a metaphor for the corruption and rot that have infected both the criminal world and the world of law enforcement. While Popeye hunts criminals, he himself operates within a system that is equally flawed. The film presents a world where the lines between good and evil, right and wrong, are not clearly defined. The police, often portrayed as the enforcers of justice, are themselves entangled in a web of compromise, violence, and questionable morality. Popeye's dogged determination to catch the bad guys is, in some ways, a reflection of the dysfunction in the institutions he works for, as well as the society that birthed them. The film questions whether the system, in its current state, is truly capable of achieving justice or whether it merely perpetuates cycles of violence and corruption. This thematic tension is encapsulated in the symbolism of the chase. Throughout the film, Popeye is chasing something, whether it's Charnier, the heroin shipment, or an abstract notion of justice. The chase, which begins with the early surveillance sequences, takes on greater significance as the narrative develops. The chase symbolizes the relentless pursuit of something that may be ultimately unattainable. The use of motion, speed, and urgency in the film's action sequences, particularly the iconic car chase, mirrors Popeye's internal struggle and his inability to ever truly stop. The chase is all-consuming, pushing Popeye past the point of reason and into a space where morality becomes irrelevant. The film's symbolism extends beyond the moral ambiguity and obsession that it explores. One of the most prominent symbols in The French Connection is the city of New York itself. Filmed entirely on location, the city plays a central role in the story, not only as the backdrop for the action but also as a character in its own right. The grungy, crime-ridden streets of the city, with their dirty subways and crumbling buildings, reflect the decay at the heart of the film's narrative. New York, much like Popeye, is a place consumed by its vices, a place where survival often means abandoning one's ideals. The city is chaotic, unpredictable, and unforgiving, much like the pursuit of justice that Popeye embarks on. Furthermore, New York's status as a sprawling, overcrowded metropolis serves as a visual metaphor for the disorder and corruption that underpins both the criminal world and law enforcement. The city's seemingly endless streets represent the sprawling nature of crime and corruption, while Popeye's chase through these streets reflects his futile attempt to impose order on a chaotic world. No matter how many criminals he brings down, the problem never seems to end. This constant tension between order and chaos is captured in the film's cinematography, which often employs wide, panoramic shots of the city's disorienting streets. Popeye is a lone figure wandering through this maze, and the city becomes a reflection of his struggle to reconcile his obsession with a world that won't yield to his desire for control. The film's exploration of corruption and moral ambiguity also ties into the broader theme of power. In The French Connection, power is not just about physical strength or authority. It's about control over a world that is constantly slipping out of one's grasp. Popeye's attempts to assert his dominance over the criminal world and, by extension, the power structures within society, are continually thwarted by the unpredictability of life. The criminals he chases are often one step ahead of him, operating in a world that he can't quite control. This sense of futility is particularly evident in the final moments of the film, when Popeye's capture of Scheider ends in an anticlimax. After all his obsession, all his sacrifices, Popeye is left standing with nothing but a hollow victory, a symbol of the fleeting and illusory nature of power in a world defined by chaos and corruption. The film's portrayal of law enforcement also speaks to a broader societal critique, particularly in how institutions often fail the very people they are meant to protect. Popeye's willingness to bend the law in his pursuit of justice highlights the flaws in the system he represents. Throughout the film, there's an unspoken tension between law enforcement's stated mission, to uphold the law, and the practical reality of working within a corrupt system. Popeye's method of operating outside the law raises unsettling questions about the nature of authority and the ethical boundaries of power. In his world, the ends seem to justify the means, yet the consequences of these choices suggest a larger commentary on how institutions, when left unchecked, can become as corrupt and morally ambiguous as the criminals they are meant to oppose. At its core, The French Connection is a critique of the systems that govern society, systems that, much like Popeye, are driven by obsession, power, and a desire for control. The film suggests that no matter how hard we chase after justice, there is no clear-cut victory in a world that is as morally fractured as the one portrayed in New York City. Whether it's through Popeye's relentless pursuit or the symbolic urban decay that permeates every frame, The French Connection speaks to the inherent flaws in our understanding of justice, power, and morality. The city, the characters, and the narrative all serve as metaphors for the larger struggles at play in society. Struggles that remain unresolved, just like Popeye's obsessive pursuit of his own personal brand of justice. The French Connection is a film defined by its raw, unpolished realism, a visual and auditory approach that transcends mere filmmaking technique and becomes integral to its narrative. Director William Friedkin, working alongside cinematographer Owen Roizman, crafted a film that feels as much like a documentary as it does a high-stakes crime thriller. From the grittiness of the streets of New York to the high-energy chases, every aspect of the movie's style serves to immerse the audience in a world that feels alive, chaotic, and unforgiving. Through carefully chosen cinematography, innovative sound design, and a strikingly unconventional use of music, The French Connection creates an atmosphere that is as compelling as its plot and characters. From the very beginning, the film's visual style sets the tone. Friedkin's decision to use handheld cameras was not merely a stylistic choice. It was a conscious attempt to place the viewer right in the midst of the action. The handheld camera, while more commonly used in documentaries, is particularly effective in The French Connection because it gives the sense that the viewer is right there, trailing behind Popeye Doyle, Gene Hackman, as he relentlessly pursues his targets. The jittery, almost intrusive motion of the camera pulls the viewer into the gritty world of New York City, forcing them to experience the rough, unrelenting pace of Popeye's work. This immediacy mirrors the urgency and intensity of the film's central characters and their pursuit of justice. The camera is often jittery, moving rapidly to follow characters through crowded streets, weaving in and out of traffic, or tracking Popeye through his world of grimy apartments and dirty alleyways. One of the most striking examples of this technique occurs early in the film during a scene where Popeye and his partner, Cloudy, Roy Scheider, conduct surveillance on a French drug dealer. As the camera swings from Popeye to Cloudy, the handheld movement gives a sense of urgency, making the audience feel like they're on the move right alongside the characters. This raw approach to cinematography provides a sense of realism, highlighting the tension and instability that is at the heart of the film's world. Instead of offering a polished, carefully framed shot, Friedkin and Roisman embrace the roughness of handheld work to convey a sense of being constantly in motion, always on edge, much like the characters themselves. This sense of immediacy is further enhanced by the film's use of locations. Friedkin insisted on filming on the streets of New York, capturing the true essence of the city's gritty underbelly. Filming on location not only added authenticity to the film, but also forced the filmmakers to work with what was available, resulting in shots that feel as though they are truly happening in the moment, unplanned and unscripted. The urban sprawl of New York becomes as much of a character as the people in the story, and the raw energy of the city is mirrored in the intensity of the story. The visual style is often chaotic and disorienting, just as the streets of New York are for Popeye and Cloudy. The locations, whether they're the bustling streets of Brooklyn or the sterile, impersonal interiors of police stations, are used to reflect the characters' mental states, creating an underlying tension between them and the environment they inhabit. What makes The French Connection visually captivating is its ability to manipulate space. The film doesn't just follow characters through static settings but uses the world around them to create a sense of urgency and peril. One of the most iconic examples of this is the famous car chase, which remains one of the most thrilling action sequences ever captured on film. Here, the use of tight close-ups and rapid cuts heightens the feeling of danger, while the long, wide shots show just how overwhelming the cityscape can be. The high-speed chase through the streets of New York is relentless and breathless, and the camera work mimics this sense of urgency. The handheld shots become more frantic, jarring, and unpredictable, putting the audience in Popeye's shoes as he races to catch his quarry. There's no sense of distance in this chase. It feels immediate, close, and visceral, adding to the tension of the moment. The cinematography in The French Connection isn't just about action and movement, though. Even the quieter moments of the film are captured with an intense focus on atmosphere. In scenes where Popeye is alone, whether he's observing a target or simply sitting in his car, Roisman's use of lighting and composition speaks volumes about the character's isolation and internal struggles. The lighting, often harsh and unflattering, creates stark contrasts between light and dark, reflecting the moral ambiguities of Popeye's character. These moments, while not as fast-paced or action-oriented, are visually compelling in their own right, providing insight into the inner workings of Popeye's mind. But it isn't just the handheld camera or the location work that makes The French Connection stand out visually. It's the way the filmmakers use editing to enhance the experience. The editing in the film is fast-paced and unpredictable, mirroring the erratic nature of Popeye's investigation and his pursuit of justice. In particular, the film's use of jump cuts, sudden transitions that cut between different moments in time, creates a sense of urgency and unease. The way that scenes are edited together, often without smooth transitions, is jarring, much like the chaotic world that Popeye navigates. There's no time for reflection or calm, just constant motion, as the film propels itself forward at a relentless pace. This editing style contributes to the film's sense of unease, always keeping the audience on edge and propelling them through Popeye's world without respite. The chemistry between Hackman and Scheider wasn't just a product of their performances. It was nurtured by the environment that Friedkin created on set. The director's commitment to realism and authenticity extended to how he approached working with his actors. Friedkin's reputation for pushing actors to their limits is well documented, and The French Connection was no exception. He was known for his improvisational style and unorthodox methods, often leaving his actors to fend for themselves in chaotic environments, trusting them to react authentically. One of the most memorable moments of this came during the subway chase scene, where Friedkin had the actors run through the train station without rehearsing the exact details, allowing for genuine reactions of confusion and tension. This was not an isolated instance. Friedkin believed that chaos on set would translate to chaos on screen, and he pushed his actors to channel that raw energy into their performances. In a particularly famous moment of improvisation, Hackman was instructed to chase a suspect without knowing exactly where the man was going, which added an element of unpredictability to the scene. Hackman's frustration, which at first appeared to be part of the character, was entirely real. The moment felt spontaneous, chaotic, and entirely believable. Hackman's willingness to be thrown into these unpredictable scenarios allowed his performance to feel more authentic and human, rather than scripted or rehearsed. The on-the-fly nature of the film's production gave the actors a sense of freedom, a sense that they could be in the moment and react organically, creating performances that felt spontaneous rather than overly orchestrated. However, Friedkin's approach to directing wasn't just about throwing the actors into intense, unpredictable situations. It was also about creating a deep sense of trust and camaraderie among the cast. Despite the sometimes tense and challenging work environment, there was a strong sense of mutual respect between the actors. In fact, it's been reported that the cast would often go out together after long shooting days to unwind, which contributed to the authenticity of their on-screen relationships. Hackman and Scheider, in particular, formed a tight bond during the production of the film, and their rapport and familiarity with one another translated seamlessly into their performances. Their characters' evolving relationship, Cloudy's quiet frustration with Popeye's obsession and Popeye's eventual realization of his own isolation, felt grounded in the real chemistry the actors shared. Beyond the leads, the film also features a number of other performances that further elevate its storytelling. Fernando Rey's portrayal of the suave, elusive drug lord Charnier is a perfect contrast to Popeye's chaotic, rough-around-the-edges persona. Rey brings a calm, almost aristocratic dignity to Charnier, making him both compelling and menacing. This contrast between Popeye's aggressive pursuit and Charnier's calculated calmness creates a fascinating dynamic that plays out throughout the film. Charnier is not a villain in the traditional sense. He's sophisticated, measured, and utterly confident, which makes him a dangerous adversary for Popeye. Rey's performance adds a level of intellectual complexity to the film, as he embodies the cold, methodical nature of organized crime. His interactions with Popeye are the perfect counterpoint to the emotional intensity of the leads, adding depth and nuance to the film's exploration of crime and justice. Other key supporting performances, including those from Tony Lo Bianco as the slippery drug dealer Sal Boca and Marcel Bazuffi as the cold-blooded hitman, further contribute to the film's overall sense of tension and unpredictability. Each character, while supporting, is fully realized in their own right and serves to heighten the stakes of the story. But beyond the actors themselves, the set dynamics of The French Connection played a significant role in shaping the final film. The on-location shooting in New York City gave the movie an authenticity that was unmatched by studio sets. Friedkin's decision to film on the gritty streets of the city, capturing everything from the dimly lit corners of Brooklyn to the bustling subway stations, allowed the film to breathe and feel like a living, breathing entity. The locations became more than just backdrops. They were integral to the narrative. The city itself was as much a character in the film as Popeye or Charnier, with its dilapidated buildings, crowded streets, and harsh lighting contributing to the film's sense of urgency and danger. The sense of unpredictability in the environment mirrored the characters' internal chaos, and the filming style, often shot with handheld cameras, further emphasized the gritty, unpredictable nature of the world the characters inhabited. The film's chaotic shooting style didn't just affect the actors, but also the production team. The famously dangerous car chase through the streets of New York City was one of the most challenging and dangerous sequences to shoot. Friedkin insisted on real traffic, real pedestrians, and no permits, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The film crew was forced to improvise constantly, working with the traffic patterns of the city, the unpredictable nature of the environment, and the limited resources available. The result is one of the most iconic chase sequences in film history, a raw and dangerous ride through the streets of New York that is still regarded as one of the most exciting moments in cinema. When The French Connection was released in 1971, it struck a chord with both critics and audiences. Its raw energy, unpredictable pace, and anti-hero protagonist were unlike anything audiences had seen before. Critics praised the film's realism, with many noting its documentary-like quality, and Hackman's performance became an immediate highlight. The French Connection didn't just represent a new direction for crime thrillers. It became a touchstone for the genre, influencing a host of films that followed. The film went on to achieve critical acclaim, winning 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Gene Hackman. Hackman's portrayal of Popeye Doyle became one of the most iconic performances in cinematic history, and his complex, multifaceted character continued to captivate audiences. However, The French Connection didn't just resonate in the immediate aftermath of its release. It also enjoyed lasting fan engagement. The film's raw portrayal of law enforcement, its tense, realistic chase sequences, and its flawed but memorable characters have kept it alive in the public consciousness for decades. The French Connection solidified its place in the annals of film history, influencing countless directors and filmmakers who were drawn to its gritty realism, its morally complex characters, and its unflinching portrayal of urban decay. Even today, it remains a seminal work in the crime genre, one that continues to engage viewers and spark conversation. Through the chemistry between its actors, the dynamic set environment, and the film's lasting critical and audience reception, The French Connection has cemented itself not just as a great film of its time, but as a timeless classic in the world of cinema. ChatGPT said, "The French Connection isn't just a film. It's an enduring force in cinema. A movie that redefined the crime thriller genre, influenced generations of filmmakers, and embedded itself deeply into the fabric of popular culture." Released in 1971, it arrived at a time when the American film industry was undergoing a transformation. Hollywood was grappling with shifting cultural landscapes and growing disillusionment with traditional filmmaking conventions. Enter William Friedkin's gritty, raw, and relentless film that not only captured the paranoia and unease of the era, but also set a new standard for storytelling in crime cinema. In the decades since its release, The French Connection has proven itself to be more than a film. It's a cultural landmark, a touchstone for directors and audiences alike, and a piece of cinema that continues to reverberate throughout the industry. In the years following The French Connection, its influence was undeniable. The film's no-holds-barred approach to crime storytelling set the template for the modern cop thriller. Prior to The French Connection, crime films were often stylized and theatrical, relying on heightened drama or clear-cut morality. But what The French Connection introduced was a raw, unsentimental portrayal of law enforcement. Its characters, flawed, obsessive, and deeply human, became the prototype for a new kind of protagonist in film. Popeye Doyle, played by Gene Hackman, was not a perfect hero. He was a man consumed by his own obsessions, a detective willing to bend the rules to get the job done. The gritty, unpolished world he inhabited was just as morally murky as he was. This shift had a profound impact on the genre. Directors like Martin Scorsese, Brian De Palma, and Michael Mann, who would go on to define American crime filmmaking in the following decades, were all influenced by The French Connection's rawness and intensity. Scorsese's Taxi Driver, 1976, for example, echoed The French Connection's portrayal of a morally compromised protagonist and the grim urban environment in which he operates. The film's use of gritty, urban New York as a character in its own right was adopted by countless other films that followed. Michael Mann's Heat, 1995, for instance, captured the same atmosphere of high-stakes pursuit and moral ambiguity that made The French Connection so compelling. In fact, many of the conventions of the modern police procedural and crime thriller, such as complex, flawed protagonists, the blurring of moral lines, and an emphasis on urban realism, can trace their roots back to The French Connection. The impact of The French Connection wasn't limited to its direct influence on genre filmmaking. It also transformed the way directors thought about cinematic style. William Friedkin's documentary-like approach to the film, which featured handheld cameras, on-location shooting, and an unorthodox shooting style, helped shape the new wave of American cinema. Friedkin, working with cinematographer Owen Roizman, eschewed the glossy, polished look of traditional Hollywood films in favor of a grittier, more immediate visual style. The use of handheld cameras, for instance, made the audience feel as if they were right alongside Popeye and Cloudy, experiencing the chase, the danger, and the paranoia firsthand. The long, unbroken takes and quick jump cuts not only increased the tension, but also gave the film a sense of realism that was uncommon in the genre at the time. This unvarnished approach to filmmaking was emblematic of the new generation of directors, many of whom sought to break free from the stylistic restrictions of previous decades. In this way, The French Connection was a cornerstone of the so-called New Hollywood movement, which sought to upend traditional Hollywood filmmaking conventions in favor of more daring, unconventional approaches. Alongside films like Easy Rider, 1969, The Godfather, 1972, and Chinatown, 1974, The French Connection helped define a new era of American cinema that embraced character-driven stories, complex themes, and a sense of unpredictability. It represented a new kind of filmmaking, one that was unafraid to tackle the messiness of human nature and society. Beyond its impact on filmmaking, The French Connection left an indelible mark on pop culture. The film's iconic car chase, which remains one of the most thrilling sequences in cinema history, has been endlessly referenced, parodied, and homaged in movies, television shows, and video games. The sequence's raw energy and intensity became a blueprint for filmmakers looking to create memorable, high-stakes action scenes. But the film's cultural influence extends beyond the chase itself. The character of Popeye Doyle, played with gritty determination by Gene Hackman, became a symbol of the lone, troubled cop. His world-weary, obsessive pursuit of justice, often at odds with the system he is sworn to protect, would inspire countless other characters in film and television. From Clint Eastwood's Dirty Harry to the morally ambiguous heroes of later crime thrillers, Popeye Doyle's complexity and contradictions helped redefine the archetype of the troubled detective in American cinema. The film also introduced a level of realism to the portrayal of police work that was rare for its time. Rather than glorifying law enforcement, The French Connection presented its officers as deeply flawed, sometimes ruthless individuals who were often willing to bend or outright break the rules to get the job done. This portrayal of police work would influence future films and television shows that sought to explore the complexities of law enforcement and the ethical dilemmas that accompany it. The Wire, True Detective, and Sons of Anarchy, all of which delved into the moral complexities of police work, owe a debt to The French Connection and its unapologetic portrayal of cops as deeply imperfect individuals. The film's critical success was immediate and undeniable. Upon release, The French Connection was met with widespread acclaim from critics, who hailed it as a groundbreaking achievement in American cinema. Its raw energy, innovative direction, and morally complex characters set it apart from the more formulaic crime films of the time. The French Connection not only took home 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director for Friedkin, and Best Actor for Hackman, but it also earned a place in the history of American film as one of the defining works of the 1970s. Hackman's portrayal of Popeye Doyle, in particular, became an iconic performance in cinematic history, and his career was forever associated with the role. But the film's impact didn't end with its initial release. Over time, The French Connection has continued to be regarded as one of the greatest American films ever made. Its influence on the crime genre, its enduring cultural relevance, and its lasting critical acclaim have solidified its place in the pantheon of great films. It was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress in 2005, further cementing its cultural significance. Its place in film history is assured, and its legacy continues to inspire new generations of filmmakers and audiences. Beyond its direct influence on the crime genre, The French Connection has remained significant because it speaks to something larger than just the world of law enforcement and criminals. The film's portrayal of a world that is morally ambiguous, filled with corrupt institutions, broken individuals, and a sense of endless pursuit, captures the mood of an era. Released during a time when the United States was grappling with political disillusionment and societal unrest, The French Connection resonated with audiences who were searching for something more complex than the glossy, escapist fare that had dominated Hollywood for years. Popeye Doyle's relentless pursuit of justice, his refusal to play by the rules, and his ultimate isolation mirrored the sense of frustration and disillusionment felt by many during that time. The film's themes of obsession, moral compromise, and the relentless pursuit of something that can never truly be attained gave it a timeless quality, making it as relevant today as it was when it was first released. Even now, more than 50 years after its release, The French Connection remains a touchstone in film history, a film that not only changed the crime genre but also challenged the way filmmakers thought about realism, morality, and narrative structure. Its impact on cinema, television, and pop culture cannot be overstated. It is a testament to the power of cinema to not just entertain, but to provoke, to challenge, and to leave a lasting imprint on the collective consciousness. Its legacy endures because it remains, in so many ways, an uncompromising reflection of the human condition, imperfect, raw, and endlessly fascinating. In the end, The French Connection is a film that continues to hold a mirror up to its audience, forcing them to confront the dark, chaotic, and often contradictory nature of the world we live in. The French Connection is not just a film. It is a cultural milestone, a blueprint for modern filmmaking, and a masterclass in storytelling. From the very first frame, it hooks the audience with its gritty realism, its morally complex characters, and its relentless pace. The film captures the essence of an era, the 1970s, a time of political unrest, disillusionment, and shifting societal norms, and does so in a way that feels both timeless and unique. William Friedkin's bold vision, combined with the unforgettable performances of Gene Hackman, Roy Scheider, and a talented supporting cast, turned The French Connection into a cinematic tour de force that would go on to influence filmmakers for generations. At its core, The French Connection is about obsession. It's the story of Popeye Doyle, a flawed and obsessive New York cop, who will stop at nothing to crack a case that becomes more complicated and dangerous with every twist. Gene Hackman's portrayal of Doyle is nothing short of iconic. His performance encapsulates the grittiness of the character, someone who is willing to push every moral boundary, who operates in a world where rules are constantly bent or broken, and who is driven by a singular vision of justice that blinds him to the consequences of his actions. Hackman's ability to bring Popeye to life with such authenticity and depth is what makes the character so compelling. He's a man who feels real, who makes mistakes, and who faces the harsh consequences of his decisions. The audience feels every frustration, every failure, and every moment of triumph alongside him. The film's brilliance also lies in the dynamic between Hackman's Popeye and Roy Scheider's Cloudy. While Popeye is the film's central figure, it's the partnership between him and Cloudy that grounds the film emotionally. Cloudy's more cautious, rational approach serves as a counterbalance to Popeye's reckless obsession, and this dynamic adds layers to the story. Their partnership feels authentic, with moments of tension, camaraderie, and subtle understanding that evolve over the course of the film. The relationship between Popeye and Cloudy reflects the central theme of moral ambiguity. While the two men may be working toward the same goal, their methods and motivations are vastly different, and their conflicting philosophies add depth to the narrative. Beyond the characters and their relationships, The French Connection stands out for its unflinching portrayal of New York City in the 1970s. The city itself becomes a character, as crucial to the story as the men who populate it. Friedkin's decision to shoot on location in the gritty streets, subway stations, and urban sprawl of New York City lends the film an authenticity that would be impossible to replicate on a soundstage. The streets are claustrophobic and dangerous, and the sense of isolation that Popeye feels throughout the film is enhanced by the chaotic, unpredictable nature of the environment. This sense of urban decay, combined with Friedkin's documentary-style cinematography and use of handheld cameras, gives The French Connection an immediacy that makes it feel more like a documentary than a fictional crime drama. The film doesn't just show New York City. It immerses you in it, taking you to the heart of the action and forcing you to experience the tension and chaos of the pursuit firsthand. Then there's the film's pacing, which is relentless. Friedkin's decision to avoid traditional storytelling conventions in favor of a more fragmented, unpredictable narrative keeps the audience on edge from start to finish. Whether it's the exhilarating car chase through the streets of New York or the slow-burn tension in the build-up to the film's explosive conclusion, The French Connection keeps you engaged by constantly challenging your expectations. It doesn't offer easy answers, and it doesn't rely on cliché plot twists. Instead, it builds tension through atmosphere, character, and the gradual unfolding of its plot, creating a sense of unease that lingers long after the credits roll. The iconic car chase, in particular, is one of the most thrilling and influential sequences in film history. Unlike the polished, choreographed action sequences of modern Hollywood blockbusters, The French Connection's chase is chaotic, dangerous, and raw. Friedkin's decision to shoot the sequence without the use of special effects or stunt doubles created a visceral, real-time experience that left the audience on the edge of their seats. It's a sequence that doesn't just serve as a moment of excitement. It also speaks to the underlying themes of the film. Popeye's obsession with catching the bad guys is reflected in the urgency of the chase. His single-mindedness is so intense that it transcends the chase itself, becoming a symbol of his larger pursuit of justice, however flawed and dangerous it may be. But The French Connection isn't just a thrill ride. It's a deeply reflective film. At its heart, it asks fundamental questions about the nature of justice, morality, and obsession. Popeye Doyle, despite his rough exterior and his blatant disregard for authority, is a deeply human character, filled with contradictions and complexities. His pursuit of justice, his need to prove something, drives him to make decisions that are morally questionable at best. The film doesn't present him as a hero, but rather as a man grappling with his own demons, struggling to reconcile his desire for justice with the realities of the world he inhabits. This moral ambiguity is what makes The French Connection so timeless. It challenges the viewer to think critically about right and wrong, and whether the ends ever truly justify the means. The influence of The French Connection extends far beyond its immediate genre. The film's impact on crime thrillers and police procedurals is immeasurable, but its influence can also be seen in films that explore the darker corners of human nature. Directors like Martin Scorsese, Michael Mann, and Quentin Tarantino were all influenced by the film's raw energy and its willingness to push boundaries. The film's portrayal of morally ambiguous protagonists, its emphasis on realism, and its use of urban environments to amplify tension have all been echoed in the works of these directors. The French Connection redefined what a crime film could be: gritty, unflinching, and filled with moral complexity. Its impact can also be seen in the rise of more realistic portrayals of police work in film and television. Shows like The Wire and True Detective owe a debt to The French Connection's unromanticized portrayal of law enforcement, where good and evil are often blurred, and where the pursuit of justice is a complex, sometimes dangerous endeavor. The film's influence is felt not only in the way it handles its characters but also in the way it conveys the messy, chaotic reality of the world it depicts. Beyond its cinematic impact, The French Connection has firmly embedded itself in the cultural landscape. It remains one of the most referenced and parodied films in pop culture, particularly for its thrilling action sequences, its iconic car chase, and its memorable characters. Popeye Doyle himself has become an archetype of the flawed, obsessive detective, a role that has been explored in countless films and television shows since. But the film's impact is not just about its characters or action sequences. It's about the way it made audiences think differently about the genre. It challenged them to confront the gray areas between right and wrong, and it asked them to consider the cost of obsession, even in the pursuit of something as noble as justice. Ultimately, The French Connection stands out because it has endured. It remains a film that continues to be studied, admired, and revered by cinephiles and filmmakers alike. Its themes of obsession, moral ambiguity, and the nature of justice are as relevant today as they were in 1971. It speaks to the complexity of the human experience and the dark corners of the human soul. It is a film that dares to ask difficult questions, and in doing so, it leaves a lasting imprint on its viewers. As we conclude this deep dive into the world of The French Connection, one thing is certain. This film's place in cinematic history is secure. It redefined the crime genre, pushed the boundaries of storytelling, and introduced audiences to a world that was as thrilling as it was morally complicated. It remains a classic that continues to inspire and captivate, challenging us to think critically about the world we live in and the characters we meet along the way. If you love this breakdown, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of cinema. Let's keep exploring movies together.